Happy Monday, everybody, and welcome into the Keeper Action News studio. Mick Miller still here on the Monday Trifecta without my co-host Alan Hoshida, who is officially a married man this Saturday. He got married in California, and we wish him the very best. He's going to be back probably either tomorrow or Wednesday, and then next Monday he will be back here in the studio with me talking all things local sports. And we'll have a couple fun topics as well, as we always do on Monday. And today, it is an extremely rainy Monday, so it's good to be in the studio. It's great to not have to be out. All of our reporters just left the newsroom to go out and grab all the local news stories, whereas we are here in the studio talking all things sports. It's going to be super fun. Kick off our show, we have to talk about the Tri-City Dust Devils, whose season came to an end last Wednesday. They were in the NWL Championship trying to capture their first ever title. Unfortunately for the Dust Devils, they came up just a little bit short because the Hillsboro Hops, they won in Game 5. And let me tell you, this was one of the most dramatic series I've ever covered in any type of sport. Game 1, the Hillsboro Hops hit a game walk-off home run. Andy Yerzy hit that walk-off. It was extremely dramatic fashion. The Dust Devils had a lead going into the 9th inning. And then in the bottom of the 9th, the Hillsboro Hops were able to put together a bunch of runs, and then Yerzy walked things off. Game 2, the Dust Devils blew them out. Johnny Hamza hit a grand slam, and that was also the only thing that they really needed to get that victory. They came back to the Tri-Cities and lost Game 3, bounced back, won Game 4, and then in Game 5, the Hillsboro Hops captured the NWL Championship with a 3-1 victory over the Tri-City Dust Devils. Let me just say that it was a pleasure covering this team. I think that they were probably one of the most least likely to go to the championship game, and not because they didn't have the talent, but because their season was so up and down. And I had the opportunity to interview not only Chris King, but their GM as well, Daryl Ebert. And that was something that they talked about, that they were super grateful that this team had made it to the championship and they were able to represent the Tri-Cities. But they also were super grateful because the season did have a lot of ups and downs. There was injuries, there were losing streaks, and in the second half they really had to battle and dive deep to get a playoff berth to even be able to compete for a championship. And not only were they able to beat the Spokane Indians, who were number 1 in the division, they captured the Northwest League North Division title, but the NWL Championship went to the Hillsboro Hops. An amazing season for them. I'm interested in seeing who they will bring back for next season. If they bring back a lot of the guys that they had this year, they're going to have a lot of experience going into next year. And so that will be a contributing factor into whether they are able to capture that first and very elusive title. But kick things off, want to give a shout out to everybody in the Dust Devils organization. They had been very accommodating to us in our coverage this entire season. We were able to get interviews with players. We were able to talk with fans. We were able to talk to people within the organization. Everything was smooth and everything went well. And so we want to thank everybody in the organization. We want to thank all the coaches, manager Mike McCoy, and all the players. Congratulations on a tremendous season. Have a great offseason. Make sure to get in the gym and get working and come back even better and stronger than you were this year. And we'll look forward to covering you guys next season. All right, let's transition to high school football. Week 2, baby. It was a lot of fun. Alan Hoshida wasn't here, so it was basically me and all of our amazing team here at Keeper Action News running all over the region, grabbing as many games and grabbing as many highlights as we could. We're going to go through a series of games, especially in the Mid-Columbia Conference. We'll also touch on a couple other schools in our region, and then we'll wrap things up with some NFL power rankings. But we got to start first with our Keeper Action News Sports Friday Night Fever game of the week. There was the Chiawana Riverhawks and the Kennewick Lions out at Edgar Brown Stadium. There was a lot of hype going into this game, especially from a media perspective, because covering these two teams in camp, they have polar opposite brands of football. The Chiawana Riverhawks have a ton of weapons on the outside, and on the offensive side of the football, they want to spread you out and score as many points as possible. Whereas the Kennewick Lions have a more old school meat and potato style of football in that they want to pound the ball up the middle. They want to waste a lot of clock, and they want their defense to force a lot of turnovers and then allow their offense to be in good field position and be able to convert off of those turnovers. Chiawana Riverhawks, they pitched a shutout 37-0. And this game really came down to turnovers. I think the Riverhawks forced 8 turnovers. And one kid in particular that I want to touch about, he was the Mix Picks #1 play/performance of the week yesterday, and our 6:30 and 11 Sunday Sportscast Mix Picks is a segment that we take all the best plays and all the best highlights and performances of the week, and we poured them in 5. And the number 1 spot went to Aiden Mason last night because he had 3 interceptions and a fumble recovery for a touchdown. He has 5 interceptions on the season. We've only been playing football for 2 weeks. So I'm not really good at math, but that's 2.5 interceptions per game. And then add in a fumble recovery for a touchdown. That's what really kicked it off. Chiawana kicked a field goal, went up 3-0. The Kennewick Lions fumbled the football. Mason scoop and score, took it in 10-0. That was a hole that the Kennewick Lions weren't able to dig out themselves out of. They had a lot of fumbles and a lot of interceptions, which happens a lot in the early parts of the season, that you're just going to make a lot of mistakes. And week 1, week 2, you're not really going to get into your groove until October. We're still in September. So football at all levels, whether it be high school football, college football, or the NFL, teams don't really start getting into a groove, into a rhythm until October. That's what really happened for the Kennewick Lions offense. Defensively, they were pretty stout. They had a pretty good game. Judging by the score, you wouldn't think that because it was 37-0, but the Riverhawks defense, let's give them a lot of credit. I know Alan and I have talked a lot about their offense and how elite and stout they are on the offensive side of the football, but defensively, they were able to pitch a shutout. And on the year, the first 2 games, Chiawana Riverhawks have scored 75 points. They've only allowed 7, and those 7 points came against Richland in game 1 when Ben Fuel was able to cut up the seam and score a touchdown on a big play. It seemed that there was a little bit of miscommunication on the back end of the defense on that one. But other than that, defense is clamped down. They haven't allowed other teams to score a lot of points or put up a lot of yards on them. So not only are they good on the offensive side of the football, but defensively they are very good. They are very stout, and I'm expecting big things from them this season. I think that they should be able to handle the competition in the Mid-Columbia Conference if they play the way that they did on Friday night, locked in and focused on what they have to do. Another player that I want to give a shout-out to is Dion Lee. I think he is probably one of the most explosive and talented players on the offensive side of the football for the Riverhawks. J.P. Zamora really likes to go to him. He lines up in the slot a lot of the times, but he also can play on the outside. He has been very, very, very successful in the first 2 games of the season, and he seems like he doesn't care about contact. He will go in the middle, has no problem going in the middle, has no problem taking screen passes and breaking them off for big plays. Kobe Young, still getting worked into the offense. He's a huge target on the outside. I expect them to go to him a lot. Got off kind of to a slow start in the game against Kennewick, but he's going to not only be able to be targeted more, but with Dion Lee as well, those 2 receivers, it's got to be a lot of offensive weapons that J.P. Zamora, the sophomore quarterback, is going to be able to use for his advantage. A little side note, Kobe Singleton, the 3-star athlete for the Chiawana Riverhawks, went down with a knee injury. It didn't look good. We wish him the very best. We hope that it's not as serious as it looked, and we also hope that his recovery goes very smooth and he's able to get back up on the field as soon as possible. I heard that he's going to get an MRI today, so we're going to be waiting for the result of that. And again, we hope him the very best. But Chiawana, they're just stacked on the offensive, defensive side of the football. So I think that they're going to be moving forward. They're going to be probably back-to-back MCC champs. Obviously, it's very young in the season. Anything can happen. Coach Graff talked about that in training camp, that high school football is funny and that anything can happen at any point in the season. So you never know. There's nothing that as a foregone conclusion. For Kennewick, I think that the takeaway that they can have from this game is that they're in still a good spot. You're still 1-1. Unfortunately, you weren't able to get the victory against Chiawana, but offensively, you made a lot of mistakes that you can clean up and get rid of that going into week 3. Blaine Chavez is a very good quarterback. Miles Mayofsky is a very good running back. And I got to give a shout out to Miles because on the last podcast, I called him Mason, which is his cousin's name. His name is Miles. Put some respect on his name, Miles Mayofsky. I'm going to shift to this now. Next game was Hanford versus Walla Walla. The Blue Devils traveled to Fran Rich Stadium. This was the most competitive game of the week. Fortunately, I was only at the Chiawana and Kennewick game. We also had a bunch of shooters and photographers at all of the games that we could grab this weekend. And one of our photographers was at this game, and he was texting me and giving me updates. And Hanford and Walla Walla, they were going at it. I did not expect Walla Walla's offense to be as good as they have been the first 2 weeks. They put up 25 points against a very, very good Hanford team. And the Falcons, bounced back after losing to Kennewick in week 1, in which last week Hanford and Kennewick was the best game of the week. And this week, Hanford again in the best game. So I think the Falcons will continuously get better throughout this year. And the fact that they are playing in great games this young in the season is not only giving them good experience, it is giving first-year starter Easton Weishide a lot of experience on how to battle through adversity on the offensive side. And this is his first year starting, and he is very impressive. When I first saw him start playing, I didn't know, because I didn't go to training camp. Alan had gone to training camp, and he was telling me about how Hanford had this quarterback before Easton who set like 9 school records, very, very talented, very good quarterback. And then they graduated like 30-something seniors, and they're bringing in a whole bunch of youth kids. But they have such a good system there that these kids have been in that program for a while now, and so they're used to being able to be in that system and building experience with each other. And so Hanford comes away with a 28-25 victory. That's huge for the Falcons, because I think that game against Kennewick, it could have gone either way. And had they lost this game to Walla Walla, you go into an 0-2 hole. That's really tough to bounce back from, especially with a bunch of big games still on their schedule, but able to get that victory over Walla Walla. And then for the Blue Devils on their side, you have to come away very happy. Ryan Marticelli played extremely well. First-year starter for the Blue Devils. New coach, new offense, new coaching staff. So he's going through a progression of learning things. These two teams, I think, will be very, very competitive in the MCC. I think that at the top tier, we've got like the Hanfords, we have the Kamiakins, we have the Chiawanas and the Richlands, and then Walla Walla, they're on the come up as well. And so they might fight their way into that top echelon of teams in the Mid-Columbia Conference. But this was the best game of the week, in my opinion. 28-25 victory for the Hanford Falcons. Both teams getting some momentum going into we're starting to get into the chunk of the season where things can get a little interesting, especially with weather. It's raining outside today, and so it's nice and it's easy to play in like 70-degree weather, sunny. But when it starts raining, when it starts getting cold, that'll be interesting to see how offenses evolve. But Hanford versus Walla Walla, great game. My game of the week, even though our Friday Night Fever feature game of the week was Chiawana versus Kennewick. The best game by far, without a doubt, was Hanford versus Walla Walla. Next up is the number 2, and I think you could make an argument that Kamiakin is the number 1 team in the MCC. Only Chiawana and only Kamiakin are the only undefeated teams in the conference right now, which is absolutely crazy if you take into account that we've only played football for 2 weeks and only 2 teams are undefeated. That shows me that this conference is very competitive. And I talked to the coaching staff in Hermiston, because this is only their second year in the conference. What they learned last year in their first year is that the MCC is not a cupcake conference, in that it's not soft. You're not going to have a lot of games in which you're just going to go in and be like, okay, we can roll these guys by 40. We'll rest our starters, get them some rest, and also get our backup some experience. No, that's not how it works in the Mid-Columbia Conference. Every single night, you're going to get someone's best. And if you're the top team or you're the bottom team, everybody's competitive. Everybody wants to play for that top spot. And I think it's interesting because coming from the East Coast, every school has a football stadium. So home field advantage is a legitimate thing. Here in the MCC, there are only the 3 stadiums in the Tri-Cities, and then you got 1 in Hermiston, 1 in Walla Walla. The Kennewick schools all share one. The Richland schools share a stadium, and the Pasco schools share a stadium, which is something new to me coming from the East Coast, because where I'm from, everybody has their own stadium. So, you know, you're playing at these same stadiums. You're very familiar. Everyone's familiar with these stadiums, and it's so close that people, unless games are at Hermiston or out at Walla Walla, the student sections have been great, and the community has been really good. All these stadiums have been packed to the brim. I got to go back to the Chiawana thing real quick, because they had the live band playing, and the band was like warming them up. And there's nothing better than, you know, a live band and a great drum line. And Chiawana, shout out to you guys, because your drum line and your band, they were on fire. Now let's get to the game of Kamiakin versus Southridge, because the Braves are, like I said, one of 2 teams that are undefeated. The Braves are 2-0 on the year. They got a victory over West Valley in week 1. And then week 2, they had the Southridge Suns out at Lamson Stadium. And they pitched, they did not pitch a shutout. It was 41-7. That was the final. 87 points in the first 2 games for this Kamiakin team. Run Kano is capable of putting a ton of points on the board. They remind me a lot of Chiawana in that they have a young sophomore quarterback who is very talented. Henry Mercado, very, very talented quarterback. They have a ton of weapons on the outside. And add this in for the Braves, they might have the best running back in the area. Tuna Altair might be the best running back in the area. We've got a lot of great running backs, but for what I've seen so far, Tuna, very talented, very capable of breaking tackles. If you try to arm tackle this kid, it's not going to work. If you try to go one-on-one, he might run you over. You've got to gang tackle this kid, and you've got to put defensive schemes into play to allow yourself to not able to allow him to bounce to the outside. You want to contain him. You want to keep everything on the inside. But the problem is if you keep the front seven so focused on Tuna, Henry has the ability to not only dink and dunk, but he can throw that thing. Henry Rutz, I think his name, I can't remember. I'm sorry to all the kids that if I'm butchering your name. I promise I'm going to get better. It's only week 2. I'm not in midseason form yet. But Henry Mercado's got a bunch of kids that he can get the ball to. And the Braves are very good on the defensive side of the football. I mean, 41-7 against a Southridge Suns team who is on the come up. They are building a culture there, and they're trying to improve week in, week out. But the Braves are a team that should not be taken lightly. I don't know when they play Chiawana. I wish that I had my phone out. I do actually have my phone, but I don't have it out, and I'm not going to waste all your guys' time while I search here on my phone to try to see when Chiawana and Kamayakin are going to play. But whenever they do, mark your calendar, wherever it is, plan to get there early. We will plan to be there because that is going to be a fantastic game, and I cannot wait for those two teams to go at it. Again, Chiawana and Kamayakin both tied at the top of the MCC right now, both teams 2-0. It's going to be very interesting to see how their seasons shape up, but I expect the Kamayakin Braves and the Chiawana Riverhawks to battle for that #1 spot. Chiawana trying to go back-to-back, Kamayakin trying to get that title, and I think Tuna Altair is capable to lead that team to get that title this season. Last game for the MCC before we start talking. Actually, we'll talk about Pasco a little bit. Let's talk about Pasco first. Pasco was on the road. Lost 50-26 against Eastmont, I believe. The Bulldogs got a victory in week 1 against the Hermiston Bulldogs. It was a very great game. And the thing about Pasco is I think they'll have their bumps and bruises because they are still a young team. And coaching staff is still relatively young and trying to build a culture. But the loss was rough. And the good thing about the loss is that they went down big early, but they bounced back and cut the gap and put points on the board and didn't allow it to get out of hand and become a super blowout. You only lost 50-26. It was worse than that at the beginning of the game. So what that tells me is this team doesn't give up. They're very resilient. They're very well coached. They have a culture within that program that they're going to fight to the end every single game. So they'll be back in the Tri-Cities next week. I believe they take on the Southridge Suns, which is going to be a very interesting game as those two teams usually are at the lower part of the standings in the MCC, and so they'll be going up against each other. There's going to be pride on the line. Both of those teams are going to try to get victories early on the season and really build and try to get momentum going into the middle chunk. And these, like I said, weather conditions are going to be very huge as the weather starts to get a little bit colder, and we got weird conditions like rain and wind. It'll be interesting to see how these teams evolve. But Pasco 50-26 this past weekend up in Eastmont. Last game in the MCC before we start talking about other teams in our region is the Hermiston Bulldogs hosting the Richland Bombers. Bombers went up early. Bulldogs fought back, but Richland held on to win. 28-14. Ben Fuel, tell you, this kid might be the best receiver in the area. And it might be a hot take. It might be me just having my opinion. But caught 11 passes, 200-plus yards, 2 touchdowns. He's got 3 touchdowns on the year, 300-plus yards in the first 2 games, so he's averaging 150-plus per game in the first 2 games. The kid is a stud. And not only does he play offense and receiver, but he is also on the defensive end, which I didn't really know until I watched his highlights on, I think they call it Huddle. I think that's where kids post their highlights, and so I was watching his highlights. He's a really good defensive back. I don't know if he plays defensive back or free safety, but whatever he does, he plays in the back end of the defense, and he is very good. He had a couple plays where the offense was going like up the right side of the football, and he was lined up on the left side, and he came all the way around and made tackles. The Bombers went down to Chiawana in week 1, but they bounced back, and they looked very impressive against Hermiston. The Bulldogs of Hermiston, unfortunately, lost their quarterback, Chase Elliott. Shout out to you, Chase. Hope you're doing well and recovering and getting ready to bounce back for your junior season. So put it in the backup quarterback. Now you have to get him the snaps with the ones in practice, and you have to get him ingratiated into the offense and allow him to get comfortable with the team and the offensive line, the running backs, the receivers. So Hermiston, you got to kind of restart, unfortunately. Richland got a big win, and I think Richland also is going to be the top 5 teams in the MCC. I think they're going to huddle around there. But to get a big win against Hermiston, which I have not been to Hermiston for a game yet, but have been there for soccer games, have been out there for practice. It's a beautiful facility, beautiful field. I hear that the stadium gets packed. The community out there really loves their football. So for Richland to be able to go on the road and get that victory, huge victory for the Richland Bombers. That's our MCC wrap-up real quick. Let's talk about the Royal Knights. The Royal Knights pitched a 49-0 shutout. When I first moved here, I heard about Royal because they had like a 50-something game winning streak or something like that, and they were super dominant. Alan talked about them all the time. Haven't been to a game yet, but the photographers that have gone to the games and have brought back highlights have only brought back highlights of this Knights offense, which is very high octane. They put up a lot of points, and they are very smart in their schemes. They have trick plays. They have flea flickers. They run out the outside. They run in the inside. They do jet sweeps. I have struggled doing that in video games. I have struggled running these complex offenses in video games. For those 16, 17, 18-year-old kids to be able to grasp that and put it into practice is very, very impressive. So Royal, I think they have the capability and they have the talent and they have the experience and clearly the community and coaching staff to be very dangerous this year. It's only week 2, but the first 2 games, watching the highlights, kind of talking to photographers who go down there and watch the games and kind of go through all those things, they have voiced how good these 2 teams, this one team, I don't know why I'm talking 2 teams. It's Monday, it's raining. We are just having a crazy Monday. That's how it's going to go. But Royal, they just have the capability. They have the weapons, and defensively, they shut people down. My thing is, if you have experience, good coaching, good defense, and an offense that puts points on the board and doesn't turn the ball over, that is the formula for winning a state championship. It's not only the formula for winning games, because if you have a good offense, you can win games in the regular season. If you want to win a state championship, you need to have senior leadership and experience, which they have, good coaching, great coaching staff with experience, have been there before, know what they need to do, what they have, stout defense, doesn't give up a lot of points, doesn't give up a lot of big plays, because that's huge. Not a lot in football. If you give up a bunch of big plays, that means that, one, you're not all on the same page. There's not a lot of communication. There's not a lot of experience. So they don't give up a lot of big plays, and they don't give up a lot of points. And then offensively, don't turn the ball over a lot, which they don't, and capable of putting points on the board on a consistent basis, which they do. And so the Royal Knights, I expect big things for them. The last team I want to talk about before we get to the NFL and before we start going national, as we keep it local here on the Monday Trifecta podcast as much as we can, is Tri-Cities Prep. What in the world? I think that can I call them the I'm not going to call them the Jaguars. I'm going to call them the Tri-Cities Prep Chiefs in reference to the Kansas City Chiefs, because Dante Mowry, I called him this I talked to him on Twitter. I said, hey, I'm going to call you Dante Mahomes from now on. Then I got the highlights of his game, and I think he came in 3rd or 4th in mixed picks last night, because he went 15 of 25, 345 yards, 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Oh, by the way, he is just a junior, which means not only do we get more games this season, but we get another year next year. Which means I am so excited to be able to cover this kid, so excited to be able to cover this team, because they, in the first 2 games, amazing. Last week against Liberty Christian, was like a video game score. This past week, oh, sorry, it was only 54-6. This offense is insane. They can do it however they want. Run game, strong. Pass game, strong. Defense, strong. In the first 2 games, they have outscored their opponents. They are so good that they've got me stumbling over my words. I can't even enunciate them correctly. First two games, they're outscoring their opponents 133 to 12. 133 to 12. I couldn't do that if I was playing Madden on easy. That's why I want to call them the Chiefs, because they play like the Kansas City Chiefs. That's why I want to call Dante Mahomes, because he's putting up Patrick Mahomes type numbers. I mean, his numbers are not far off from what Patrick Mahomes did yesterday. What was Patrick Mahomes yesterday? He was like 33 of 40, 444 yards, 4 touchdowns. Well, Dante went 15 of 25, 345 yards, and he had 6 touchdowns, which is 2 more than the MVP in the NFL. I'm just telling you, TCP, I know the kids probably listening are too young for Run DMC, but TCP is like Run DMC in that they are dominant, and you better not take them lightly, and you better not allow their offense to get into a groove, because they're in a groove right now, and that rhythm is going to continue going into week 3. Defenses across the area, here's a warning to you. Watch tape. You got to watch tape on these guys. You have to figure them out because they are dominant. Jaguars, you guys are doing a great job. 54-6 victory this past week, outscoring opponents 133 to 12. They are doing a great job. They are very well coached. They have great weapons. They are very stout on the offensive and the defensive side of the football. There's nothing much more I can say about this team other than y'all must wake up feeling dangerous. That's a reference to Baker Mayfield, and he's got Monday Night Football tonight, and we'll see if he actually is dangerous. So that's a smooth transition from our high school football wrap-up to the NFL, which week 2 wasn't as good as week 1. Week 1 had like a lot of good games. I feel like this week is just kind of had like random team, like Houston was playing Jacksonville, and it wasn't a good game, and the Broncos played... Can't remember who the Broncos played the Bears, and that wasn't a really good game. But there were a lot of good performances, and there were a lot of telling stories in the NFL. So to wrap things up for the Monday Trifecta podcast, let's go through Mick Miller's NFL Power Rankings. Should we start at 8 and work ourselves? Let's go to 8 to 1, because I feel like if you start 1 to 8, then it starts to get boring on the back end. Let's start with who comes in at number 8. And then who comes in at number 1. The reason I choose 8 is because there are 4 divisions in the AFC, 4 divisions in the NFC. And so you choose one from each division. But then I was going through it, and I was like, dang, some divisions are, like, really bad. And so, like, I'm not going to pick a team through the first 2 weeks that's playing bad. So we'll keep the same format. We'll choose 8 teams. Some divisions are going to have more than one, and some divisions might not have any because they're just not good. For example, I can't remember what division it is, but the one that the Colts are in, my team, the Colts, they don't get anybody because Jacksonville's not good. Colts beat the Titans, and Houston, I mean, they can't protect Deshaun Watson. So number 8, which I don't want to do because not a huge 49ers fan. I know Allen is, but I'm not a huge 49ers fan. But they are 2-0, and they had a big win this past week, and Kyle Shanahan is probably one of the best young coaches. Jimmy Garoppolo, not a huge fan of him as a quarterback, but I have to give him props because they had a really good week this past week, and I think that they're going to be able to move forward in division. That's going to be competitive. It'll be interesting when division play starts because Seahawks are also undefeated, Rams are undefeated, and the Cardinals aren't that good, so we won't even talk about them. So 49ers at number 8, and speaking of the Rams, they come in at number 7. They haven't been as good through the first 2 games as they were last year, like they were super dominant last year. Todd Gurley is like still hurt, I think. I mean, there's something wrong with him clearly because like he hasn't been as dominant through the first 2 games as he was like the past couple of years. Jared Goff, I think defenses are starting to figure them out offensively. They played the Saints yesterday, and who knows how that game would have went if Aaron Donald, who is like the best player in football, period, didn't get to Drew Brees and hurt him. So Drew Brees got hurt last night, and so they won. But they're still undefeated, so I got to put the Rams in there. Seattle Seahawks. To all you Seahawk fans, going to give you some love. Team 1 wasn't pretty. Neither was the win against Cincinnati. But at the end of the day, it's not how pretty the game is. It's whether or not you get the victory. And that's what they did. They beat the Bengals, and then yesterday they beat the Steelers. They were able to hurt Big Ben Roethlisberger, so Big Ben was hurt, and so he didn't play in the second half. They put Mason Rudolph, who's a second-year quarterback, but basically a rookie because he didn't play at all last year. They scored when they needed to. They got stops when they needed to. It looks like Russell Wilson and Tyler Lockett are back on the same page. DK Metcalf got his first touchdown of his young NFL career. Defensively, they still give up a lot of big plays, which you can't do in the NFL, especially with teams like the Packers in the NFC, the Rams in the NFC. There's a lot of good teams, and so can't give up a lot of points. But the Seahawks come in at number 6. Number 5, the Baltimore Ravens. Did not see this coming. Lamar Jackson, yeah, he's not a running back. He is most definitely a quarterback. The kid can sling it, and he played extremely well against the Arizona Cardinals. Now, I get it. They played the Miami Dolphins week 1 and beat the crap out of them. And then they played the Arizona Cardinals, who probably were only going to be second to the Miami Dolphins as worst team this season. But what I've seen is that the defense is always good for Baltimore. Mark Ingram is a great addition. Hollywood Brown is a great addition. They drafted 2 tight ends to be able to give weapons to Lamar Jackson. And offensively, they've built an offense that is surrounded around him and is going to allow him to be successful. So, if you ask me, number 5 is the Baltimore Ravens. Number 4, shout out to local kid. I think he's from Prosser. Pretty sure he's from Prosser. Kellen Moore, the new offensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys. They come in at number 4. Again, they played the Giants in week 1. They're terrible. And then yesterday, they played the Redskins, who are also not that great. But in the games that they've played against not-so-great opponents, they've looked good. They got off to a slow start yesterday against Washington, but then got into a groove. Dak Prescott is good. I know that the media have been blasting him, and I've even blasted him on Twitter once or twice before, but he's good. Like Amari Cooper, Jason Witten, Ezekiel Elliott, the offensive line, and their defense is so good. Leighton Vander Esch, Jalen Smith, that secondary, like they are so good. DeMarcus Lawrence, like I could go on and on, even though I don't want to because like they're the Cowboys and like whatever. But Cowboys come at number 4. The Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers has a defense. And the last time that Aaron Rodgers had a defense, he won a Super Bowl. I think that was in 2011 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, is he going to win a Super Bowl this year? I don't know. Offensively, they haven't even really had a really good 2 games. They've only put up 28 points in the first 2 games. It's only 14 points a game for Aaron Rodgers. That's not good, but they're 2-0. They beat the Bears, who probably have one of the best defenses in the league. Beat the Vikings, who also have one of the best defenses in the league. And their defense is insanely good. They're able to put points on the board, or they're able to get multiple turnovers and put their offense in scoring position. They won 21-16 yesterday, probably not the best offensive game that they've had. I think Aaron Rodgers and Matt LaFleur need a little bit more time to get connected and be able to put that offense at the high-octane level that it can be. But when you have Aaron Rodgers and you have a defense, like I'm not going to put you out of the top 3. And so that's why they come in at number 3. Number 2 is the Kansas City Chiefs. The only knock that I could put on the Chiefs is that their defense is not very good. They give up a lot of points to bad teams. I mean, they gave up a bunch of points to Jacksonville, and Oakland had a 10-0 lead on them yesterday. But then Patrick Mahomes went insane in the second quarter, put up 4 touchdowns. It was 28-10, and then that was the final of the game because they didn't need to score any more points because Patrick Mahomes threw for like 280-something yards in 1 quarter while throwing 4 touchdowns. So when you have a quarterback that can do that, it's like, what else do you really need him to do? So the Chiefs come in at number 2, and obviously this is probably a foregone conclusion. You probably knew that this was going to come, and I knew that this was going to come when I looked at the list, and I was like, I don't want to put them number 1, but unfortunately I'm going to have to because the Patriots are like really, really good at football. Who knew? Bill Belichick's like really smart and is like a really good coach. They got this guy named Tom Brady who was drafted like 199 in his draft, but he's like 42 years old, and he's like pretty good. Oh, yeah, and they like signed this guy, Antonio Brown, who amidst all his issues off the field, I'm not going to get into it because like what goes on in athletes' personal life, I think is their business. I never want to get into that because I don't work for TMZ, but he, as a receiver, I talk about the production that they do on the field, and he's like one of the best receivers in the league. So you put in the greatest football player of all time in Tom Brady. You have the greatest coach of all time, Bill Belichick, have one of the best receivers of all time in Antonio Brown, and also they have Julian Edelman and Josh Gordon, who are great receivers on the outside. Young running back in Sony Michel, and the best defense that Bill Belichick probably has ever had. I don't know what else I'm supposed to say about it because I just gave you the exact reason why They're number one. They're probably going to go to the Super Bowl again. That's going to be like the fourth year or fifth year in a row, or fifth of the last 6 years. And they're probably going to win another Super Bowl, which is going to be Tom Brady's seventh. And just continue to be the greatest dynasty in NFL history. So, yeah. I mean, I'm a Colts fan, and I've been tortured by the Patriots for 25 years. So, there's nothing more that I really can say. Here's how good the Patriots are. This is how good Tom Brady is, and this is why I'm going to leave him as the GOAT, and there's no conversation, there's no argument that anybody can make about it. Here is why Tom Brady is the greatest of all time. It's not even close. Not only does he have 6 Super Bowls, not only has he played in like 9. Is he? Yeah, he's played in 9. He's 6-3 in the Super Bowl. Not only is he going to break every single record. I'm a Colts fan. And so there was like a rivalry back in the day that was Peyton Manning versus Tom Brady, which really wasn't a rivalry because I don't really understand why they deemed it a rivalry when Tom Brady just beat Peyton Manning every year. Peyton Manning played for the Colts. Tom Brady outlasted Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning's now retired, working with ESPN. We drafted Andrew Luck, who was like the highly touted quarterback coming out of Stanford, to be able to beat Tom Brady. Andrew Luck retired a couple weeks ago. Our starting quarterback, Jacoby Brissett, was Tom Brady's backup. Jacoby Brissett, who is Tom Brady's backup, has a backup, Brian Hoyer, who was Tom Brady's backup. Does that make sense? Peyton Manning retired. Andrew Luck retired. My Colts quarterback is Jacoby Brissett, former Patriots, Tom Brady backup. The backup that was Tom Brady's backup has a backup who was Tom Brady's backup. And Tom Brady's still playing. They're 2-0, favorites to win the Super Bowl, probably will win the Super Bowl, and he's 42 years old. That's a pen drop. It's supposed to be like a mic drop, but that's why Tom Brady's the greatest of all time. And that's how we end the podcast. We end the podcast with me admitting something that I never wanted to admit, and that's how we're in season 1. I don't even know. Tom Brady is so great that he's just got me flustered. That's how it is. So episode 9 of the Monday Trifecta podcast ends that way. This is the last episode for, I don't know how long. He might go on vacation again. But Alan Hoshida will be back for episode 10. He's currently in California working his way back to the area, and we'll get him on the podcast next week, and we'll see what argument we'll get into, and I'll present this argument to him as to, is Tom Brady the GOAT? And that's the conversation that him and I will have next week. Thank you so much for tuning into the Monday Trifecta podcast. Remember, like, share, and subscribe. Subscribe to stay notified. We're on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and SoundCloud. We are currently working in the progress of going to other platforms. We want to get on Spotify. We want to get on iTunes. So if there's a platform that you would rather have access to this podcast, let us know in the comments below. Again, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and SoundCloud are the accounts that we are on right now. All you have to do is search this logo, Monday Trifecta. Just put that in there, and you can find it at those 4 platforms. And again, if you want us to go to a different platform, if YouTube isn't as great, if you like it to be on Facebook or you want it to be somewhere else, make sure to let us know in the comments below. Also, comment on how you think the show is going. Do you like the episodes? Do you like what we're talking about? Do you have questions that you want us to debate and get into? All these things. We want you to be as interactive as possible. That is the goal of this podcast. I want to give a shout out to all of you who have watched episodes 1 through 9. Thank you. Tell your friends. We're going to be here every single Monday talking about all things local, and we'll get into some fun topics, whether it be the NFL or whether it be movies or music. We want to entertain you as well as we can. For Mick Miller and my friend Alan Hoshida, thank you for tuning in to the Monday Trifecta podcast. Have a great week, and we'll see you next Monday.